For all those who appreciate the work that we're doing here on Standing for Truth, please hit that subscribe button because we are just getting started.
Dinosaurs on the ark? You have got to be kidding me. Oh yeah? Well, we're going to look at that. Coming up. Alright, T-Rex, do your thing. Hey guys, it's Donnie. It's time to get into this topic here on dinosaurs on the ark. This is going to be a two-parter. There's going to be two videos in just this one section of the presentation, just to keep the video shorter. So let's jump on into this. This is a topic, or this is a question that I normally get from folks when we start talking about dinosaurs were created with man. It's right next. The next question I get from folks is, what about the ark? And so we're going to look at that, and I think it's quite clear, or at least I believe the Bible can show quite clear that they were on the ark, and it's not a problem at all. And we're going to look at that, and I believe we can find all our answers right from the Scriptures, like we should. All right, so let's jump right on into this. First thing we're going to look at is we're going to look at the kind. Now, we've already talked about this before in other videos, like my baraminology. If you want to check that out, we talk about the kinds. What is a biblical kind? And so, but just set the stage on this. It says right here in Genesis 1:11 through 12, and God said, "Let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth." And it was so. And the earth brought forth grass and herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was in itself after his kind. So God, and what it says after that, and God saw that it was good. So there's nothing evolving. This is a kind, all right? This is not a variety, but a kind. You have certain kinds of plants, you have certain kinds of animals. And this next slide that you see, Genesis 1 through 21, God says the same thing. He says that he created great whales, every living creature that moveth, which the waters brought forth abundantly after their kind, and the winged fowl after his kind. And God saw it was good. So it was a finished product. Genesis 1:24 through 25, and God said, "Let the earth bring forth the living creature after his kind, cattle and creeping thing, and beast of the earth after his kind." And it was so. And God made the beast of the earth after his kind, and cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind. And God saw that it was good. So we're showing a kind of animal. He sets it up. He's setting the stage up. It's a kind. Now, when Noah was commanded to build the ark, he was told that every living thing of all flesh, two of every sort, shalt thou bring into the ark to keep them alive with thee. They shall be male and female. And God was very direct on exactly what he was to bring on the ark. He says here in Genesis 6:20, of fowls. Now we go back to those kinds again. After their kind, of cattle, after their kind, of creeping thing of the earth, after his kind. Two of every sort shall come unto thee to keep them alive. Genesis 7:14, they and every beast after his kind, and all the cattle after their kind, and every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth after his kind, and of every fowl after his kind, every bird of every sort. So they're talking about the kinds of animals. So the kinds that were created were the same kinds that were to come upon the ark. Now, again, I'm going to very briefly touch on this, but the kind that we talk about in the Bible is an animal that could come together, any two animals that could come together and reproduce offspring. Now, this right here is a little chart and we're going to look at the cat kind. So if you look down, this is called taxonomy. And so this is usually what you'll find when you look up taxonomy. You got the kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and then species would be the last. All right, so the biblical kind that you're looking at would be around the genus or the family. Now for this chart here, I put the family as the kind. So if you look at those cats, at the very bottom there, you got the species. Now, what is a big debate amongst evolutionists is the evolutionists claim that species should not be able to reproduce together, but they're finding that it can. Some new research that has come up to light is that there are species of animals that can come together and reproduce and produce offspring. And so in this chart here, you can see the dog, the familiaris, and the lupus are different species, but they are the same kind of animal. A dog and a wolf can come together and produce offspring, and same with the cats. Now, certainly there is certain limitations to this, and so like a leopard and a house cat would probably have a hard time coming together and reproducing offspring. Definitely there's some physical limitations to that, but it doesn't mean that they cannot produce offspring. Now, this chart here is showing how all the cats can come from just two kinds of cat, but just from one pair of cats on Noah's Ark. And so again, as the cat, let's just say they become smaller, they're actually losing material or losing software in the DNA. And so surely you could only go to there's a certain limitation on the varieties that you can get from a cat kind, but there's no problem in seeing how just taking two cats on Noah's Ark, you can get a variety of different types of cat from just two pairs of cats. Now, what that cat those two cats would have looked like on Noah's Ark is a debate. We really don't know. But this chart right here came from Answers in Genesis magazine, and they believe that the cat could have looked like this. Now, again, going back to the what is considered a kind. Now, this right here, you got a sheep and you got a goat. These are two different species, but they can come together and reproduce. They're called hybrids. And so this hybrid here of a sheep and a goat coming together is called a geat. It's called a geat. Now, what's really interesting about these two is that a sheep has 54 chromosomes and a goat has 60 chromosomes, but they can come together and reproduce offspring. And that would be what you would call a kind of animal, a biblical kind of animal. Now, to learn more about this, now from here forward in my Dinosaurs in History presentation, I would go into baraminology just a little bit and cavemen. I do have two videos that's on this, and you see these thumbnails right here. Just look in my videos and check these out. Now, these are long videos. They're over an hour for each one, but please check them out. If you really are confused about the topic, check these out. These are really good videos, and I put a lot of time into it, and it could clarify a little bit on it. But just for time's sake, I'm not going to go into that on this video when I've already done it on the other videos. Now, how many kinds were on the ark? Now, Ken Ham from Answers in Genesis, he said there was probably less than 1,000 kinds of animals on the ark. Maybe 2,000 to 3,000 animals were on the ark. That's from the most recent research back in 2014. So if you want to learn more about that, please check out the Answers in Genesis website. I'll have some links below for you guys to click on. Now, I do know that Creation Research Society is looking into this on the different kinds, and they're doing more research into that. But there's always been a debate. Again, the traditionally held view is that species would not be able to reproduce with other species of animals, but the research that they've been able to pull out is that that's not true. And so there's many animals in the wild that they've been able to do research on, and there are traces of other species of animals in the DNA of the animals that they are doing the test on. And so it's really interesting. And you look at the different varieties of animals that we have today, and if you look all the way back to when the animals went on the ark, there's really a question on what did those original ground root animals look like. They may look completely different than what we have today. And so, but again, if you want to zero in on just this one topic, check out my video Baraminology, and I go pretty in depth on that, and we go into different types of hybrids of different types of hybrid of animals. And just remember that hybrid is two different species coming together. They consider that what's called a hybrid. We're going to continue on with the topic of dinosaurs on the ark and the animals on the ark. I believe last time we were together that I stated that I was going to break this up into 2 videos. There's just so much neat information, and I really believe that it's quite possible this one's going to be broken up into actually 3 videos just on this one topic. There's no real reason to rush through any of this information. There's some folks that just won't right off the top. But this type of information or this topic is causing people to lose their faith because they believe what they see on television and opinions by other people. And it's really a dangerous area when you start doing that and you don't have a established ground root to base your beliefs on. You're really open to just about anything. And so, but what I'm going to show you is a ground root. We're going to use the scriptures. If you don't believe the Bible, or if you have no intentions on believing the Bible, then you're wasting your time anyway. You're just going to waste your time. But if you do believe the Bible and you're just confused on the topic, then you're at the right place, because we're going to look at this stuff, and I'm going to use scripture. And that's where we need to get our information from. Not from opinions, not on television and these flamboyant movies that you see. I've even seen people that try to get their doctrine and their theology from a movie. And again, dangerous area. Remember, we're in Satan's world. Satan has control over this world right now. God ultimately has the final decision on what Satan can do, and you can see that in the book of Job. But this is Satan's world. And just like Jesus said, if you would become a friend of the world, you'd be an enemy of God. And so we need to have an established root where we get our beliefs from, and that is the Bible. And so we're going to continue on through this. And so I may pick up. I'm not exactly sure where I'm going to stop at on this one, but we'll stop and then we'll pick up the video again on the next time. And so this next slide that you see, if you want to learn more about the kinds of animals and what's Christian scientists, and I have to really be careful on the way I say that. You'll often will hear me say scientists that are Christians, because I don't want to be anybody to think that I'm of the Scientology group. And so I'm going to say scientists that are Christians. And so if you really want to learn the the Christian view or the biblical view on what a species or a kind of animal it is. We really want to stick with kinds. You want to be careful with species, and so, but it's the kinds of animals, and you will hear the Bible talk about the kinds of animals. Get up with the Creation Research Society. These guys are absolutely fantastic, and they are actively studying the biblical kinds of animals, and it is a really wild study. And if you want to learn more about that, again, look at my video of baraminology, and I go into that, and we touch on that. And so, but if you want to pause the video here and read this right here, that's fine. But get up with the Creation Research Society, and if you want to stay in touch on exactly what's going on in this study, it would be well worth your time. Now, let's get into the Bible here, and let's continue on with this study. It says here in Genesis 6:20, of fowls after their kind, and cattle after their kind, and creeping thing of the earth after his kind, two of every sort. Now, this right here is key. Shall come unto thee to keep them alive. Now, did Noah have to go out and collect these animals, or did the animals come to Noah? Now, I used to think that Noah had to go out and collect these animals until I started studying the Bible. And it is very clear, I believe, that the Bible is stating that the animals came to Noah. And I believe we can prove that by the Scriptures and through some of the stories about animals and what God did with these animals. And so, let's keep on moving. Genesis 7:9, we're still here on the account of the flood. There went in, Genesis 7:9, there went in 2 and 2 unto Noah. It says it again right there. There went in 2 and 2 unto Noah into the ark, the male and the female, as God commanded Noah. Genesis 7:15, and they went in unto Noah into the ark, 2 and 2 of all flesh, wherein is a breath of life. It says it right there. And they went in unto Noah into the ark. Remember who is in control. I like to say, who packed that suitcase? Who is the one that told Noah what the dimensions were to be? Who was the one that commanded all this? I believe God is He's going to already have an answer and a way for this all to happen without anybody really scratching their head. Can this or something like this be shown anywhere else in the Bible? And I say yes, and we're going to look at a few stories. Now, I've got some notes here because I want to make sure that I give the correct information here. So I'm going to be reading from some notes that I printed off that I usually bring with me when I do presentations. Now, the first one here that you see on the top left-hand side, that's Jonah. Jonah 1:17. I call this, well, it's called the Great Fish. And I call it Jonah's personal submarine. Jonah's personal submarine. Now, we're going to go over briefly each one of these stories, okay? Now, Jonah was commanded by the Lord to go to Nineveh and cry against it. He basically was going to be a street preacher. I don't know if anybody's ever saw any of these street preachers. Sometimes we get these folks that go up into the middle of town, and they'll just start preaching. Now, that's basically what Jonah was to do. God had sent him in there to cry against the city. He was to street preach God's coming judgment. And this is what he was to say. Yet 40 days and Nineveh shall be overthrown. Now that's basically what when Jonah got there, that's basically what he said. He just walked up to him and he said, yet 40 days and Nineveh shall be overthrown. Jonah did not want the city to repent. He wanted it to be destroyed, and for good cause. Nineveh was the capital of Assyria. The Assyrians were known for their cruelty to their captives and cities. And cities would sometimes commit mass suicides rather than be captured by the Assyrians. Jonah attempted to flee to Tarshish, but God detoured him with the help of Jonah's personal submarine. And so Jonah knew that the Assyrians were just a wicked, wicked people. They mistreated their captives and would sometimes mutilate them. And I believe there's some accounts where they would cut off their noses. And they would really mistreat their captives. And so Jonah wanted these people to be judged by God. He did not want them to repent. But as the story went on, when he went in there and he did preach to them God's judgment, these folks did repent. And so, but the point I'm trying to get across here is that Jonah, when he fled, the ship that he got on, it ended up sailing into a large storm, and the men was afraid. And Jonah said it was because of him, that the reason they were going through that. And so Jonah told them to throw them overboard. Maybe Jonah just was thinking, maybe I'll just drown and then I'll die and then I still won't have to go to Nineveh. And so, but God had prepared a great fish, is what it says. He prepared a great fish, and it came and it swallowed up Jonah. And it took Jonah back to Nineveh and spit him out on the coast. And then Jonah did what God had told him to do. And so, who guided that animal? God guided that animal. There's no problem at all. Now, the next one is in 1 Kings chapter 17, verses 1 through 6. The ravens brought Elijah bread and meat twice a day after Elijah prophesied a drought for several years. Now, what we'll do is, let me get my Bible, and we're going to look at 1 Kings 17, 1 through 6. Okay. All right. And Elijah the Tishbite, who was of the inhabitants of Gilead, said unto Ahab, As the Lord God of Israel liveth, before whom I stand, there shall not be dew nor rain these years, but according to my word. And the word of the Lord came unto him, saying, Get thee hence, and turn thee eastward, and hide thyself by the brook Cheroth, and that is before Jordan. And it shall be that thou shalt drink of the brook, and I have commanded the ravens to feed thee there. Now listen to that. God said, And it shall be that thou shalt drink of the brook, and I have commanded the ravens to feed thee there. So he went and did according unto the word of the Lord, for he went and dwelt by the brook Cherith, that is before Jordan. And the ravens brought him bread and flesh in the morning, and bread and flesh in the evening, and he drank of the brook. And it came to pass after a while that the brook dried up, because there had been no rain in the land. And then God moved him on to another area. And so there you can see that God had already prepared those animals to take care of Elijah there. And to us, that is absolutely just unthinkable. But again, with God, no problem at all. So again, the animals coming to Noah, no problem at all. I don't see a problem with that, one bit. Now, this next one here, on this next side, is 1 Samuel 4, chapter 4 and chapter 6, 7 through 16. And it says here, the ark being brought back from the Philistines to Bethshemesh by young cows that had no yoke upon them ever, and their calves were taken. Now, for the most part, what's going on here is the Philistines and Israel fought, and Israel lost 4,000 people the first time they had their round. Israel did not have the Ark of the Covenant with them when they were fighting them the first time. And they thought that if they had the Ark of the Covenant with them, they would be victorious against the Philistines. They were seeing the Ark of the Covenant as a good luck charm, or as a source of power. Once they had the Ark, they made so much noise, shouting and all right, yeah, giving the big hollers and hooping and hollering and all that mess, that they were heard by the Philistines. And the Philistines saw that Israel had gotten the Ark of the Covenant. So actually the Philistines were believing like Israel believed. Oh, they got their good luck charm. And so the Philistines said, hey, we need to fight much harder than we did before. And they did. And because Israel were basically putting their trust in really the wrong thing, the Philistines won, and they defeated Israel, killing 30,000 footmen the second time. And then they took the Ark of the Covenant. Now what happened is the Philistines took the Ark back to their land, and the Lord started putting a plague on them. And many of them were getting sick. They developed boils. And so what happened is the Philistines were like, hey, we're being cursed. And, it's because of this ark. And so what they wanted to do is they got up with some of their religious leaders, and they said, I tell you what, let's get some cows who have never had a yoke on them. Basically, they were never used for work. Nobody ever tried to tame them. And what they did is they took their young cows from them, their offspring. And so when you take some offspring from a mother, already the animal is going to become very defensive. Now, these animals were already wild as it was, and then they're going to go ahead and take their young ones from them, so that's even going to make them even more upset. And so what they said is, let's get a cart, let's hook them to it, and then let's put the ark on it, and then let's see what happens. And if the cows just wander around mooing and not really going anywhere, we'll just say, well, I guess the plague was just a coincidence. But if the cows go straight towards Israel, then we'll know that it was something else. It was because of God. And so what happened is they did that, and the cows made a beeline straight for Israel. And so now the next one is Numbers 22 through 1 through 35. Numbers 22, 1 through 35. Balaam's donkey talks with him with a human voice. Now, in 2 Peter 2, 15 through 16, he actually says that the animal had man's voice. It had a human tone. It actually spoke words out of its mouth. And that's going to be in Numbers 22 through 31. So what I'm going to do is we're going to go through Numbers 22, 1 through 30. Let's see, we're actually going to go through 22, verses 22 through 31. And it says, got to take my glasses off. When you're nearsighted, I don't need to look at papers close up, and so I only need my glasses when I'm looking at something far away. And so whenever I'm looking at books and I'm trying to look through my glasses, everything's kind of blurred. It's like opposite the way most people are. And so, at any rate, let's read this. Numbers chapter 22, verse 22, and it said, let me just give you a background first before I do this. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. Balak was the king of Moab. He was wanting Balaam, who was, in the words of, I like the way Dr. Jeremiah, if you know Dr. David Jeremiah from Turning Point, I like the way he put it. And I'm quoting what he said. Balaam ran a wholesale business in divine favors. I thought that was funny. But Balak, the king of Moab, was wanting Balaam to curse Israel. And Balak was afraid of Israel because of what they had previously done to the Amorites. After several attempts to curse Israel, Balaam kept, basically what happened is, Balaam was a big money hungry. I guess he's like one of some of these guys you'd see on television, wanting you to plant their seed faith in their ministry. And so Balak said, hey, listen, I'll give you this large sum of money if you'll curse Israel. And every time Balaam went to curse Israel, God told him, hey, listen, I'm going to tell you right now, you're to only say what I'm to give you, and he would bless Israel instead. And Balak got upset with him, and so they went round and round with this several times until the last time the Lord actually said, okay, you can go with them. But the Lord had gotten upset with Balaam, and he had put an angel in the way of the donkey. And then this is where this incident happened from here. So I'm going to start right here in Numbers chapter 22 and verse 22. It says, and God's anger was kindled because he went, and the angel of the Lord stood in the way for an adversary against him. So this is the angel standing in front of his donkey. Now he was riding upon an ass, and his 2 servants were with him. And the ass saw the angel of the Lord standing in the way, and his sword drawn in his hand. So the angel had a sword drawn in his hand. And the ass turned aside out of the way and went into the field. And Balaam smote the ass to turn her to the way. But the angel of the Lord stood in the path of the vineyards, a wall being on this side and a wall being on that side. And when the ass saw the angel of the Lord, she thrust herself into the wall and crushed Balaam's foot against the wall. And he smote her again. And the angel of the Lord went further and stood in a narrow place where was no way to turn either to the right hand or to the left. And when the ass saw the angel of the Lord, she fell down under Balaam, and Balaam's anger was kindled, and he smote the ass with a staff. And the Lord opened the mouth of the ass, and she said unto Balaam, now, this is what's going on here. Balaam is trying to get to Balak. He's riding on this donkey. The Lord is trying to prevent him by this angel that is standing in the way. Now, only the donkey can see this angel. And so what's happening is Balaam can't see the angel. Only the donkey can. So the donkey is trying every way to keep from going towards that angel until finally she just falls down and crushes Balaam's foot here. And so, at any rate, the Lord ends up opening the mouth of that donkey, and it actually speaks to Balaam with a human voice. And it says here, and the Lord opened the mouth of the ass, and she said unto Balaam, what have I done unto thee, that thou hast smitten me these 3 times? And Balaam, this is what gets me. If that would have been me, I would have been scared to death. But Balaam actually argues back with the donkey. And Balaam said unto the ass, because thou hast mocked me, I would have, because thou hast mocked me, I would there were a sword in my hand, for now I would kill thee. And the ass said unto Balaam, Am not I thine ass, upon which thou hast ridden ever since I was thine unto this day? Was I ever wont to do so unto thee? And he said, Nay. So the donkey spoke to him and said, Have I ever done anything like this before? And so Balaam said, No. Then the Lord opened the eyes of Balaam, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the way, and his sword drawn in his hand. And he bowed down his head and fell flat on his face. So in a nutshell, the Lord finally went ahead and opened the eyes of Balaam, and he saw what that donkey was showing. But that donkey spoke with a human voice. I can't explain it. I'm not going to try to explain it because it is of the Lord. And so there is no reason why we should question that. It's in the Word of God, and even 2 Peter chapter 2, verses 15 and 16, even that backs it up, that it actually spoke with a human voice, with man's voice. There was a vocalization coming through that animal. And that's just astounding to think about that. Now, let's look at a few other things. God's power over the animal kingdom. All right, now we saw these here. Let's go through a few more. Genesis 2:18 through 23. God brought the animals to Adam to name. That's amazing. That's amazing. That is exactly what. Now, if you, I actually go through this verse here in the caveman one, right at the beginning of my caveman one. We actually go through that, and I talk about that. I talk about Adam's intelligence, and so when he was created, but God brought the animals to Adam. So God's done that before. And whatever Adam named those animals, that was their name. And so God's done that before. He brought the animals to Adam. So bringing them to the ark unto Noah would be no problem at all. Exodus 8:21 to 24. The flies were sent unto the Egyptians only. So this is when Pharaoh was asked, or commanded really, to let the Israelites go. And he kept refusing. And so God kept sending the plagues upon the Egyptians. And so right here it says that the flies were sent to the Egyptians only. Now I would like to try to see somebody tame a fly and train a fly. Joshua 24:1 through 15. The hornet. Now when they were coming into the land of Canaan, God had sent the hornets into the certain parts of that land to drive out the inhabitants. Now again, I want to see somebody try to tame a hornet. Now hornets are quite powerful. I've never been stung by a hornet, but I have heard that, I guess what you would call the cicada killers, sometimes I've heard them called Japanese hornets. I've heard it's like a nail going into your leg, and that it's a extremely painful sting. And so again, God sent the hornets, and they drove out those inhabitants. So again, is that really a problem, God bringing the animals to Noah? All right, let's keep going. 1 Samuel 9:3 through 20. The donkeys were made to get lost for Saul and Samuel. The donkeys were made lost for Saul and Samuel. So basically what's going on here is Saul was the first king of Israel. And so God wanted Saul to be that first king. And so to get Saul to Samuel, he made his donkeys get lost. And what happened is, by him searching for those donkeys, that's what got Saul to Samuel. And then when Saul met Samuel, Samuel told him, hey, your donkeys are good. They've already been found. And so it's really amazing how God can use just everyday circumstances. What we would think would be irritating is actually a God guiding us. Daniel 6:6-24. God shut the lions' mouths. And so, again, these lions that were in the den of lions, these animals were a lot of times starved. And so actually the scripture does say that that when people, what had actually happened is the people that were trying to get Daniel killed eventually they were the ones that were thrown in, and it said that they were devoured before they even hit the floor. And so that's to show just how hungry these animals were. But Daniel was put in there with those lions, and he was in there all night with them, and not one lion touched him in any way to harm him. Matthew 17:24-27, the piece of money that was in the fish's mouth. And so now, let's look at this. I've got the scriptures on this. It says, and when they came to Capernaum, they that received tribute, which is basically money, came to Peter and said, doth not your master, which is Jesus, pay tribute? And he said, yes. And when he was come into the house, Jesus prevented him, saying, what thinkest thou, Simon? Of whom do the kings of the earth take custom or tribute? Of their own children, or of strangers? Peter saith unto him, of strangers. Then Jesus said unto him, then are the children free. Notwithstanding, lest we should offend them, go thou to the sea, and cast an hook, and take up the fish that first cometh up. And when thou hast opened the mouth, thou shalt find a piece of money. Take and give unto them for me and for thee. Now, there's a big bunch of hoop-de-doo, and I've looked through several different books on what exactly were they paying tribute for. There's two possible interpretations. One is that it was a custom that when the kings took over an area, they would tax the new area, and their own people would not have to pay, only the foreigners. Jesus is from another kingdom, and the children are the believers. They are from a different kingdom. And then the other view, the second view, was that the tribute was for the service of the temple, mentioned in Exodus 30:13. Everyone that was 20 years and older was required to pay it, as far as the men. The rich were not to give more, and the poor were not to give less. It was on an even par. The value of the money Jesus told Peter to get out of the fish's mouth would have been enough to pay for him and another person. And so, as far as the interpretation on that, I am tending to agree with the first one, because I don't see Jesus withholding a law that was started off way back on that. I don't see him wanting to buck the system, I guess you could say. But as far as the first interpretation, it seems to be more people are wanting to side with that second interpretation. But it just seems to me that the first one tends to fit with that, because Jesus said, "Of whom do kings of the earth take custom or tribute?" And so the first interpretation seems to fit that just right. But I don't want to go too much on a tangent on that. What I'm trying to say is, though, Jesus told him to go out there and grab that fish. Now, it very well could be that fish saw a coin, picked it up in his mouth. The Lord had guided that fish to go pick up that coin, and when Peter put in that hook, he drew that fish out, and then in that mouth was that piece of money, and it was paid. And so, no problem at all. When you put the Lord into it, no problem at all. And so, the next one here is Mark 11, 1 through 7. Jesus rides on a colt that no man had ever sat on. And so, now I'm going to tell you right now, I have never tried to tame a wild horse or a wild donkey, but I've seen people try to do it before, and they'll kick and everything. Jesus got on the thing and took off with it. And so this is when Jesus was coming in to Jerusalem, and when he was showing himself, he was coming into it and showing himself that he was the Messiah. And so again, how in the world could somebody ride a horse that had never been ridden on before? When you've got the Creator involved, all things are possible. What about the meat eaters on the ark? What about that? What in the world? What about those animals that prey upon each other? How in the world? Because you got to think now, they were in the ark for a little over a year. How are they going to be fed? Well, the Bible is very clear on that, and we're going to talk about that next. Hi guys, it's Donnie. We're going to go ahead and continue on in this topic of the animals that got on the ark, and were there dinosaurs on the ark. I need to start off by correcting a statement that I made. Sometimes you'll hear me say scientists that are Christians or Christian scientists. I know that there's a religion called Christian scientists, or Christian Science. Sometimes you'll hear it referred to as that. In a book that I have called Handbook of Today's Religions, it says Christian Science. And so I had stated in the previous video, that was the one that's noted as number 8, that I don't want people to think that I'm any connection with Scientology. And when I made that statement, I thought to myself, I said, "Whoops!" I said, "I just made a mistake." But I wanted to make sure that I did my background on that and made sure that my mind was right on that and correctly. I had made the correct assumption that I had said that wrong. Christian Science is a religion. It was actually, I went and got my book. It's a real good book. It's called Handbook of Today's Religion. It's by Josh McDowell and this one here, Josh McDowell and Don Stewart. It's an old book. I think it was back in 1983 is when the last publication of this was. I don't know if they've updated this book or not, but it was Mary Baker Eddy was the one that started this. And I'm not going to go into this religion here. I do not believe in this religion. I don't hold to anything that this religion has. But it was kind of neat. I went and went through my library. I've got an extensive library and got this book. And I didn't know that her name was so long. But her name was actually, it says the founder of Christian Science was Mary Ann Morse Baker Glover Patterson Eddy. Wow, that sounds like a whole family just in itself. And so, but that's Christian Science. Christian Science, and I believe that here in Rowan County, North Carolina, and Salisbury, we do have a Christian Science church around us. But Scientology and Christian Science are two different religions. Scientology was created by Ron L. Hubbard, the science fiction writer, and again, I do not believe or hold to any of those beliefs in that religion also. But I just want to clarify. It's something. Whenever you're doing these videos, it's kind of wild. You know, before I used to speak in front of people and congregations and classes, and when I was doing the on-camera stuff, I mean, I'm speaking to a little circle that's staring right at me, and it's really it's hard. It's harder than you'd think. Sometimes you're trying to keep. There's nobody to actually interact with, and that was one reason why I bring my wife along with me whenever I'm doing the actual videos where you see me. It's easier to keep the flow of the video going when you have somebody to interact with. But just about, all these videos with me doing the screen recordings of my slide presentations, most of them, a good 98 to 99% of them, are probably going to be just me. They may all be with just me, but I told my wife that on some of them, if she'd like to sit in, that would be fine. But again, I just want to relate that I did make that was an incorrect statement that I made, that the Christian Science has nothing to do with Scientology. They're two separate religions. And so, but with that being said, this video here is not going to be quite as long as the last one. The last one I think was around 33 minutes long. This one is going to kind of finalize the topic of dinosaurs on the ark and the animals that got on the ark and some of the questions that people have concerning that. And so, but this book that I used here for this to explain this religion, I may bring this up again. If you check out my videos, Bible study helps, I go through different books and magazines that you can use to supplement your Bible study. And I will say this, we have a lot that's given to us to understand the Scriptures. There's really no reason why people should be getting off on these wild beliefs. And I really blame the media and movies and television shows why people get some of these beliefs. And so, but you really got to go to the scriptures. And so we need to test those spirits. And so I always challenge anybody, if I say something that you don't believe or you want to do some backup on, check out my references at the end of the slides. I do give my references, and if I say it's an opinion, I will tell you it's nothing more than just an opinion. But as you can see, I do use a lot of scripture, and if there's a question on an interpretation, I will state that. And so I don't want to be accused, and I don't want to stand before the Lord and have to answer for a something that I may have knowingly have misquoted or led somebody astray. And so it's a very, very powerful thing. And so Jesus made mention of that if anybody would offend one of the little ones, and it's very possible he was talking about children, though some people believe he was just talking about the children of God. God said that if anyone should offend one of these little ones, and I believe what he's talking about is either a misinterpretation or misguiding either small children or the children that are the children of God. It would be better if a millstone was tied around his neck and he was thrown into the sea. And so God takes extreme offense to somebody that would mislead him, and that's what got Moses in trouble. Moses had he misrepresented the Lord to the children of Israel, and he wasn't allowed to go into the promised land. And so, well, again, I don't want to go into a whole lot of tangent. I can tend to go off on rabbit trails, but again, y'all, whenever I do classes like Sunday school classes and stuff like this is how we do it. There's no hurry. There never should be a rush to study the Word of God. This is the only thing that's going to matter in the end. And so, but let's keep on rolling here with this. And again, if y'all ever have any questions or whatever, please send me a message. Send me a message and ask me. And I would be glad to look into that for you. Okay? Now, one of the things that people have asked me is, what about the meat eaters? Okay, if we got all these animals on the ark and they're in there for a little over a year, what are they going to eat? How are you going to keep all that meat fresh? And or what about the animals? If you just take two of everything. Now, there were some animals that he was told to take more, and but there was no animals on the ark, or there was no animals on the earth that he was told not to take. He was told to take 2 of everything, and then of the clean animals, he was told to take 7 of those. And so we need to be careful to make sure we read the scriptures on this. And so dinosaurs created on day 6, they would be included on the ark. And God brought those animals on the ark. So I don't think that the Lord is going to pack that thing to the hilt. The Lord knows what he's doing, because he even told Noah exactly what the dimensions were to be. God was in control. He just used Noah as the vehicle to make that ark, to make that vessel for them to get into. And he even told them what to pack to eat too. He told them what to do there. And so we're going to look at that. Now, were they all meat eaters? That's the question that we need to say. And the place that you go to get that answer is in Scripture, because the Scripture tells you, 1, were they meat eaters? And 2, what did they bring on the ark to eat? All those answers is in the Bible. And so we're going to look at that. It says here, we're going back to the creation account, Genesis 1:29 through 30. It says, "And God said, Behold, I have given you every herb bearing seed which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for meat." So what he's saying is, I have given you the plants. I have given you the plants and the fruit trees. All the plants, that's what man originally ate, and that was enough to sustain his body. All right, now it says below, And to every beast of the earth, and to every fowl of the air, and to everything that creepeth upon the earth, wherein is life, I have given every green herb for meat. And it was so. So, the humans were giving plants, the plant material to eat. And it says in that second part, that second verse, that he also gave the very same thing for the animal kingdom. And so, here you can see very simple that the animals ate plants. The animals ate plants. And so it's very literal, very little. There's no confusion in this whatsoever. And so everything on the planet was a vegetarian. They ate herbs. They ate plants. Now, he says, now this is what here they are, they're loading into the ark, or they're gathering everything to get into the ark, and the Lord tells them in Genesis 6:21, now here we're into the flood. This is just before they got into the ark. And take thou unto thee of all food that is eaten, and thou shalt gather it to thee, and it shall be for food for thee and for them. And so what he's saying here is, I want you to gather the plant material, and it's going to be food for you and for them. Who is the them? The animals. The animals were to eat plants while they were on that ark. Very clear, very simple, no confusion whatsoever. Now, we're going to look at something here. I think this is kind of neat, because I'll have people ask me, what about the spiders? That we just can't. It's hard for us now to think of certain animals as eating nothing but plants. But I can take my dog outside to go use the restroom, and that dog a lot of times will reach over and will grab some plants and start chewing on them and eating them. A lot of times he'll vomit it back up, and so, but he'll eat it. He'll eat it, and there's cats that will do the same thing. Now these spiders here, I'm not going to try to pronounce the names of these spiders, but if you'll notice, now again, I know I've pointed people a lot to my baraminology video, but if you'll check out the question and answer videos that I have one called baraminology. If you really want to get a good background on how animals are classified, check out that video. It's be well worth your time. But this right here, I'll give a little brief overview of it. If you'll notice the first name of these spiders, the first one is capitalized. Now that's your genus. The second one is the species. So you got these two spiders are of the same genus, and the second name is the species of that genus. And so basically, though, I would still consider both of these animals to fall under the same kind of animal. And so it is very possible that these two spiders here very well could come together and produce offspring. And so let's keep moving along here. Now, these spiders are called orb weavers. Now, if you want to know what an orb weavers is, sometimes you'll see orb weavers, that spider there up in the top left, you'll see those types of animals, those type of spiders sometimes around September, especially in here in North Carolina. Sometimes you'll see them a whole lot more abundantly in September or even October. They tend to make a lot of webs around the front porch, and they're very beautiful webs. And if you ever get a chance to sit there and watch one put a web together, it is absolutely just astounding. Now, in my microscopic world video, my microscopic world presentation, and I will be doing that video also here on YouTube, I do go into spider webs and tarantulas and certain things that were found on the microscopic level on tarantulas that is really astounding. And so, but they did studies on spider webs, and it's really kind of neat what they have found and how a spider builds the web. They don't just throw a web together, but there is a structural soundness to them things that is absolutely just astounding. And they're studying that and wanting to copy how that is done into certain things that are made, certain buildings and stuff like that. But this is called an orb weaver. Those two spiders that you saw were called orb weavers. Now, they did a study on these spiders and what they eat. It says we found that about 25% of juvenile orb-weaving spiders' diet consists of pollen. The other 75% of flying insects. The pollen grains in our study were too large to be taken up accidentally by the spiders and had first to be digested extraorally by enzymes in an active act of consumption. Therefore, pollen can be seen as a substantial component of the spider's diet. This finding suggests that these spiders need to be classified as omnivores rather than pure carnivores, and that's more of a plant-eating animal is what they're saying there. Carnivores would be your meat eaters. And so what they're saying is that they studied these orb-weaving spiders, and that a part of their diet is plants, a plant type, the pollen. Their webs would collect like the pollen. Very interesting. Very interesting. Also, now we need to remember too that certain fossils that had been found can see where animals did attack each other. There have been fossils that have been found where animals had other animals inside of them. And so it did show. Now remember, when Adam and Eve sinned, there was a curse upon them and the entire planet. And so it states there in chapter 6 that the world was very violent, was extremely violent. And so there is no doubt in my mind that this also went over into the animal kingdom also. And so here you can see that a T-Rex tooth was in a hadrosaur tailbone. Now your hadrosaurs is like your duck-billed dinosaurs. There's been a lot. I guess you would. I've had some scientists say that the hadrosaurs were almost like cattle back in the during that time, and there was a lot of them. A lot of my flood presentation, as far as when I get into huge fossil graveyards, a lot of hadrosaurs have been found, which is really kind of neat. But at any rate, this right here, if you see that pencil, it's pointing to a T-Rex tooth that's in a hadrosaur tailbone. And so, and what is really interesting is that they did a CT scan on it. And it says a broken tooth lodged in the fused tail vertebrate, which basically shows that the bone had grew around that tooth. And so basically, again, it was healing. That bone was healing, which is showing that the T-Rex wasn't scavenging. He actually attacked that hadrosaur, and that the tooth evidently just broke off in the tailbone, and the hadrosaur got away. It survived, and enough for that tailbone to start growing around the tooth. And so really, it's really interesting. Now, people might say, well, Donnie, that shows that the animals were meat eaters. Well, again, we have to go back to scriptures. Originally, these animals were vegetarians, and that they did not eat meat. After the after the sin of Adam and Eve, then there was a curse on the earth, and that it is my belief, and I believe the scriptures does prove that, is that these animals did start turning on each other. And it's really kind of interesting, too, is that animals were not afraid of man before the flood. They weren't afraid of man. Remember now, whenever God had made the earth, he brought the animals to Adam so that he could name them. And after the flood, the Lord said that they would be afraid of him. And I'll show you that verse here in just a second. I'm getting kind of ahead of myself here. But here's a fish. Here's a fish that is eating another fish. Now, this fish is fossilized. So before it got a chance to digest the thing, It had fossilized. Now, I believe that this fish, this was right before the flood. As the flood was happening, maybe an underwater landslide or a mudslide had covered up this fish, and it fossilized it just like that. And so there was signs, or there was evidence that animals started feeding on each other, or at least attacking each other. Now, it doesn't, just because, let's go back to the tailbone there. Just because there's a tooth and a tailbone don't mean that the hadrosaur, that the T-Rex was trying to eat it. It's very well possible that he was. But it doesn't necessarily mean it. It just means that, remember, there was violence on the earth. It very well could just mean that it just got in the way of the T-Rex, and it ticked off the T-Rex, and it just bit it. And so, let's keep moving here. This is, if you look real closely here, there is remains of 3 birds found in the stomach here. And so, again, I'm not going to try to pronounce that animal's name, but there's a picture of it on the bottom left-hand corner. But if you see right there in the stomach, if you look up on right above that picture there, I've got a little red box there. I've got a close-up to it right here on the right-hand side. There is 3 birds. If you see right in there in the rib cage, you'll see 3 black spots there. Those are birds that was found in the stomach of that animal. Now, that animal, if you notice that how it's died, it's got its head thrown back, they call that the death pose. They call that the death pose. And usually when they're buried, they're gasping for air. And so it looks, they believe that while it's gasping for air, it's throwing its head back. Sometimes some of these animals and these dinosaurs are seen as if they were trying to swim, and they were fossilized. They were covered by mud or something, and it looked like they were trying to actually trying to swim. They were in a liquid environment when they died. And so, but that right there shows that this animal, and people might say, what's your answer on this one here? It very well could be, now, in the beginning stages of the flood, you got the planet. The planet was being destroyed in certain parts. Maybe these animals were just getting hungry, and they were just eating whatever they could get their mouth on. And so there's cases of when humans are in desperate situations. There's been accounts where humans actually started cannibalizing on each other. And so when a person gets hungry, they'll just about eat anything, and that's the same way with the animals. And so, but this shows here is that there was some predation going on where animals were eating other types of animals. They just weren't eating the plants. And so, again, though, that is not the way it was first created. And so when God brought the animals to Noah on the ark, there's nothing for God to put those animals in a state where they're not predating on other animals, and that God could control those animals. All right, after the flood. Now, this is after the flood. You got before the flood, everything was vegetation. Now, after the flood, there was a change. In Genesis 9:3-4, it says, "Every moving thing that liveth shall be meat for you." And then he says, "even as the green herb." So you can't confuse this. It says, "Every moving thing that liveth shall be meat," which is food, "for you." And he says, just as the green herb was. So before, they ate plants. Now after, they can eat meat. "Have I given you all things? But flesh with the life thereof, which is the blood thereof, shall ye not eat." So what they're saying is, they're not to drink blood. They're not to consume blood. And so that was the only thing that they were not to take part of. And this is after the flood. Genesis 9:2, "And the fear of you and dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth, and upon every fowl of the air, upon all that moveth upon the earth, and upon all the fishes of the sea. Into your hand are they delivered." So, now God's saying that all the animal kingdom is going to be afraid of you. Now, of course, we can domesticate animals, but if you was to just run out into the wilderness and just try to pet yourself a wolf, you'd be hard pressed to get one to come up to you, and if it did come up to you, it was probably going to be attacking you. And so, and again, that's based off of fear. One of the most dangerous things you can do is to try to corner an animal that's afraid, because that's when they can become extremely dangerous. And so it's very interesting to note this down, that before the flood, they weren't afraid. They weren't afraid. And this scripture gives that indication, because why would he say, now the fear and dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth? Why would he say that if even before the flood they was afraid? There's really no reason to mention that. And so again, it just ties in so well. So before the flood, whenever God was bringing the animals to Noah, they weren't afraid of Noah, because just like when Adam was naming the animals, God brought the animals to Adam. The animals weren't afraid of them. And so here, now they're afraid. And so God states that. And he says, now you can eat the animals. And then later on in the other books of the Bible, especially when you start getting the book of Leviticus, they start giving the dietary laws. And so what you can eat and what you can't eat. And so, but for the most part, we can eat meat. And so there's nothing wrong with eating meat at all. Now, we're going to stop right here. And that is going to be the end of the dinosaurs and the animals that were on Noah's Ark. I believe they were on the Ark. There's nothing in the Bible that states they couldn't bring them on the Ark. They were created with man. And so they had themselves a nice little spot on the ark that they were put, and they were fed vegetation during the time that they were on the ark. Now, from here on out, we're going to talk about dinosaurs and dinosaur-like animals that have been seen by man. Right here in National Geographic, it says no human being has ever seen a live dinosaur. Well, now, is that true? Well, we're going to look at that, and we're going to see the evidences of dinosaur-like animals or dinosaurs that have been seen by man, and we're going to see some of the depictions on certain artifacts and certain things that have been seen in the fossil record. And so we got a lot to cover. I think we are getting close to about halfway through this presentation. I think we're getting close to halfway through it. And again, guys, I am not in any hurry to rush through any of this. And so this is some really good information, and I think that it can clarify a lot of different things. And so again, if you want to read more into this, please look at my references below. You can check out the references, learn more, check out the links that I put in the description of each video. And guys, there's a whole lot to go. We are just, again, getting started into this. And there's some exciting things to come. And I try to keep up with the new research that comes out. And so I still got a lot of articles to go through that I keep a file on. And but I add them in as I see the importance of them, and what it relates to the biblical worldview in the Bible. So if I can show that, I definitely will. Hi guys, it's Donnie. Last time we were together, we were looking at the animals, what they ate on Noah's Ark, and then we looked at some spiders that were, some of them that were what we call omnivores, which means that they ate plants and animals. And so it is very possible that some of the animals that we think are strictly carnivores, that those animals that which eat meat, can eat plant material also. And there's a number of animals that do that. But this video here, we're going to go ahead and we're going to get into some artifacts that have been located, and I am going to let the viewers make up their own mind on what they see. And so again, if you believe the Bible and you believe it literally, and you believe that man and dinosaur was created on day 6, which the Bible, I think, clearly and literally says, then you should have no problems with the things that we're going to talk about as far as artifacts and some of the things that have been, some of the eyewitness testimonies by people. Now, and there are some artifacts we're going to talk about, which I'm going to talk about some of the problems with them and why some creation ministries don't show them as evidences anymore. And we're going to talk about that. And it's one of those things that because the greed that people have of money, sometimes people can falsify evidences to try to sell them to either museums and to certain individuals that seek to have something or a replica of an artifact that is supposedly legit. And so, like I said, we're going to talk about those things, and I'm going to show you some of them, so that way when you see these things, you will know. And so I'll talk about some of the controversies on some of these evidences here in the future. So let's go ahead and get started here. Here in this National Geographic, this is from 1993, it says no human being has ever seen a live dinosaur. Now, is that really the case? Have they actually talked to everybody that's ever lived? This is in evolutionary's eyes, that can't be the case. And so, because we have dinosaurs that died out 65 million years before man ever approached on the scene, and so that's going to be about the normal time span that you're going to get. And so in their eyes, that can't be the case. But in a biblical worldview, no problem at all. That's not man and dinosaur would have even lived together. And man would have seen them things and wouldn't even thought much of them. And so, but let's move on here. This right here is a Roman mosaic showing 2 long-necked creatures. It's dated from 101 to 400 A.D., and I'm going to try to pronounce this right. It's Lydney, Gloucestershire, England. And you can see here, if it's a close-up of it, you can see the what appear to be flippers. See those orange areas there? That looks like flippers. And then you got the long neck. And again, this is just some artwork that's been done, but it sure does look a whole lot like a plesiosaur. Looks a whole lot like it. Now that's a different photograph of the same thing you saw before, but let's go back to that other one. You can see it here. I mean, it's very clear. Very clear. Of course, there's some differences in there, but where did they get the idea of that animal? It's very clear they must have saw something to get the idea, because it looks a whole lot like a plesiosaur. And that would be like Nessie and, of course, Lake Champlain. And we'll talk about those later. Now, some of the things I'm about to show you, just a few of them, is from this guy right here. His name is Vance Nelson. He wrote these books here. I think he may be writing another one. It seems like he was thinking about, or he had talked about last time. I don't know if either I talked to him through the email or telephone, which both of those I have had contact with Vance. We've actually had correspondence through the phone and email, a lot of email, and with questions that I had. But I think he's thinking about writing one on caves. I'm not for sure. It seemed like he had mentioned that he was going to do one on caves also. But he wrote these books here, and I highly recommend these books. This gentleman here, he actually goes to these sites, a lot of the sites. He actually gets his hands on a lot of artifacts, and he's very detailed in the way he looks at it. And he doesn't just take anybody's word on a certain artifact. He wants to find out the ground roots, where it came from. And so I think that's a good way of of looking at these things. But I would highly advise you guys. I'm gonna have his link to his website in the description. But check out this guy's books. I highly respect his eye on this stuff, and some artifacts that are questionable, he will stay away from them. He tries to hold true to the ones that he knows would, beyond a shadow of a doubt, the artifacts are legit. And then again, and like I said, this guy here is very well worth it. He's a creation speaker, and he has a traveling museum also. He's from Canada, and he's a family man, and so he takes his time and his money to travel all around the planet to look at artifacts. And so I'm going to show you just a couple of them, but it don't even touch the hem of the garment with what he's got in his books. And so if you really would like to have some good books in your library, again, check this guy out. Check this guy out. Very worth it. He also had his hand in the Big Valley Creation Science Museum in Canada, and with I believe it's Harry Nyborg and Ian Juby, and these guys all worked together to put that museum together. So you guys check them out. I know Ian has done some interviews with Vance on his YouTube website, and so I'll see if I can find a link to those YouTube videos so you can check those out. And like I said, I know Ian has interviewed him about, I believe it was the Amazon expedition that you're looking at here on the screen. And so, and they talk about the questions and some of the controversy in these artifacts. And so, check it out. I highly recommend this gentleman. Good man. This right here is from this church here is the Carlisle Cathedral in Carlisle, England, built in 1122 A.D. Its Bishop Richard Bell was buried in the floor in 1496. And if you look, let me go back here just for a second. If you look to the picture on the right-hand side, that is the where he's buried at. And so what we're going to look at is those brass plates there. There's some pictures of some things in those brass plates, and we're going to check that out. If you notice here, you see a bat, a fish, a dog, and a bird. All those are animals that we see today. No problem, they do exist. Now, these two animals here are what's in the question. What are they? They don't match anything what we would consider domestic type of animals, but they sure do look like dinosaurian type of animals, and we're going to check that out. Now these pictures right here did come from his book, and so and we're going to look at the animals that he shows that very well these animals could be those, what's pictured here. If you see there that little red box there, that little tail, it looks like there's spikes on that tail, and it very well could be a Shinosaurus. If you look right there at the bottom end, the bottom right hand and left hand corner, the bottom of that screen there, you see the picture of the Shinosaurus, the whole body, and then you see that tail, and you can check out that tail there. It's very well possible that animal depicted on that brass plate very well could be what's depicted here. And then you got the whole length of the animal there. This other one here, to me, even looks more like a dinosaur. I don't see any other animal that even remotely looks like that. But this Volcanodon, you can see that there. It really looks a lot like it. Lot like it. What else could it be? Now, let's go to South America. Let's go to Peru. This is a little figurine, a representation of what definitely looks like a dinosaur. It's believed to be 550 to 1,000 years old. From the, I'm going to try to pronounce this, the Chankay culture, a pre-Columbian culture from Peru, existed from 1000 AD to 1450 AD. Really unique. Check out that little figurine there. Very interesting. What other type of animal could that be? And you notice that it's got skin patterns on it also. And so it very well could be a Mosaurus. A Mosaurus. It's a young one is what they're saying there. It very well could be. Now this is, from what I'm told, this is a Ica mummy from Peru. And it had some fabric around the, I believe it was around the neck area of this mummy. And if you look real closely, you can see within that red circle there is an animal. It's got a head, a neck, and then you got the body, and then you got the tail, and then you got what's depicted as supposedly being 4 legs. What could it be? Is it a dinosaur? Is it an alligator? You know, an alligator, their head and their neck is like one. But here it shows the head and the neck kind of separate there. This is from some fabric from the Chimu culture, 1,000 years old. Pre-Columbian culture from Peru. Existed from 900 AD to 1470 AD, 1470 AD. And you look at that animal in there. These 3 animals here, they're all both the same thing. It's a pattern inside of that. It looks like it really does look a whole lot like a hadrosaur. And that would fall under your duck-billed dinosaurs. I've had one show say that they were like the cattle of the dinosaur world. They were like cattle. There were just a great abundance of them. They find a lot of them in the fossil record. And this is a drawing of some skin that they found, and it looked like that there was patterns in the skin, and we're going to look at that because they have found some fossilized dinosaur skin and some impressions of dinosaur skin, and it looked like that there was patterns in the skin. So this right here, they depicted that in their fabric here. And so in this drawing of the dinosaur skin that was found, you can see that there was a pattern, a circle type of pattern in the skin. And like I said, we're going to touch back on this again because there's some other figurines that do have the depictions of the circles in it. This is from a hadrosaur mummy that was found. And what I mean by mummy is that the whole hadrosaur was fossilized. The whole entire body, the organs, the bones, the skin, everything was fossilized. The entire dinosaur was there. It's like the whole dinosaur had turned to stone. And so, but if you look here, it had skin scale patterns and kept a 3D shape. The patterns may have been camouflage or striped, and we're going to look at some more of that. But you can see that these scales have different patterns in them, and they believe that those different patterns were colorations also, different colorations on the dinosaur skin. And here's some more fossilized skin. This is from that same hadrosaur that was found, and you can see that that's the actual dinosaur skin itself. It's turned to stone. Now this is a Nodosaur that was found, a absolute remarkable animal. And we're going to look at some neat features about this. And so when I got to looking at how they did the taxonomy into the classification of this animal, I was a little confused myself. Of course, the taxonomy is done by man, but it is in the Ankylosaur family. but it's called a nodosaur. It's grouped into two families. You got Ankylosauridae and Nodosauridae. And even though it says Nodosauridae, this one here actually falls under the Ankylosaur. I guess, again, when I was doing a lot of research into this, I was actually confused myself. And but again, it falls under the Ankylosaur. It's a type of Ankylosaur, just another variation. And if you take an Ankylosaur, it has the big round ball on the end of its tail, and you put this animal here, which does not have that great big ball. They look a lot alike. So it very well just could be a variation in the kind of animal. But this one right here was dated at 110 million years old. And let me go back up there to the word nodosaur. It means knobbed lizard. And but presently, this dinosaur here is at the Royal Tyrrell Museum in Canada's Alberta province, is where this animal right here is. But check out that head. That is absolutely incredible to see this. You can actually see what the dinosaur looked like. And let's take some notes. This is a notes on the Nodosaur. It was named by Othniel Charles Marsh in 1889. That's where the word Nodosaur came from. This one, the one that I just showed you, was found on March 21st, 2011 by a heavy equipment operator at the Millennium Mine, 17 miles north of Fort McMurray, Alberta in Canada. That's where, if you look right there about the center of the screen, you'll see a little teeny tiny red dot with a thick black circle around it. That's where that location is at. And so you got the United States at the bottom. So this is a cooler environment, a much, much cooler environment. And so it's not uncommon for dinosaurs to be found in absolute frigid areas, and we're going to talk about that when I get into the Noah's Ark and the flood presentation. But there have been dinosaur footprints, scores and scores, I believe thousands of dinosaur footprints that have been found, fossils and tropical foliage in these frigid temperatures. I'm talking like in the Arctic circles of this planet. And so, which shows that this planet was a much temperate climate. It was more like a tropical, close to being a tropical environment. And we're going to talk about that here in just a minute on what they found in this area with this Nodosaur, what they believe this area was like. All right, only the front half from the snout to the hips was intact enough to recover. It was regarded to be the best fossil of a Nodosaur ever found. I'm wanting to say that when they actually saw, when this heavy equipment operator saw what he had dug into, I want to say they chiseled out about a 15,000 pound block of rock, and then they took it back and they worked on that thing. I'm going to guess maybe 7 years. I'm guessing maybe 7 years. Before they actually, it took them 7 years to actually take it, because they had to chisel that thing out, and they were working on it. Thousands and thousands and thousands of hours was worked on this animal. So even though the block itself was 15,000 pounds, they believe the animal itself would have weighed around 3,000 pounds. But at any rate, it was intact enough to recover, regarded to be the best fossil of a Nodosaur ever found. An actually incredible animal, and there's a picture of it right there. That's all they were able to get out of that block, and you can see that is just a tremendous looking fossil. Really, you can see the detail. It's really amazing. What's amazing about it is that when they found it, it wasn't crushed. It wasn't flattened out. It still kept pretty much its shape. And here is what it would have looked like alive. And so a really amazing looking animal. And so they believe that the one that was found would have been about 18 feet long, and it would have averaged around 3,000 pounds. All right, let's keep going. For paleontologists, The dinosaur's amazing level of fossilization caused by its rapid undersea burial. Now, that's their words. This isn't a Christian article that I'm getting this from. Caused by rapid undersea burial is as rare as winning the lottery. Usually, just the bones and teeth are preserved, and only rarely do minerals replace soft tissues before they rot away. So even they admit that this is really an unusual thing. And what they pretty much state, what happened with this animal, they believe that it got washed by a flood into a river. They don't believe in the biblical flood. We're not talking about that type of flood. They just believe that a river had overflooded. This animal got too close. It got washed into it. And what had happened is it got washed into the sea, and it had ballooned up with gases, and that it burst. It sank to the bottom, and that sediments laid on top of it before it could get rot away or get eaten away. And so I don't personally agree with that. I don't think that's what it was. I believe the flood of Noah happened. This animal was covered extremely quickly by sediments and preserved it. I do not believe that an animal, because I want to say that they think that animal could have been floating in the water up to a week before it bursted with the gases and then it sank to the bottom. I do not believe that animal would have lasted near that long. And so, but at any rate, it says paleobiologist Jacob Vintner, an expert on animal coloration from the UK's University of Bristol, has studied some of the world's best fossils for signs of the pigment melanin. But after 4 days of working on this one, delicately scraping off samples smaller than flecks of grated Parmesan, like a Parmesan cheese, even he is astounded. The dinosaur is so well preserved that it might have been walking around a couple weeks ago. Vintner says, I've never seen anything like this. Now, a lot of y'all are saying, okay, Donnie, what's the big deal with you showing this? What the main reason I'm showing this is is because of the coloration. That one dinosaur figurine that I showed you that had the stripes coming down it. It's really interesting that they would put that on there, because some of the dinosaur fossils that have been found does show evidences that the animals did have coloration and patterns in their skin, and this one here is no exception. And so, and we're going to talk about that more. I'm going to show you a few things that was found on this fossil. They said that it looked like it was frozen in stone, as if it had gazed upon Medusa. Now, Medusa is that Greek, in Greek mythology. I believe that she was a gorgon. This would be the woman with, she's like half snake, half woman, and her head is full of snakes, serpents. And if you look upon her, you'd be turned to stone. Any of y'all that had saw the movie back in the 80s, Clash of the Titans, that's what I believe Perseus had went and got Medusa, and they came back, and that's what he turned the Kraken into stone, was Medusa's head. Even though her head was cut off, he still was able to defeat the Kraken with just her head. If you gazed upon it, it would still turn you to stone. But if you look here, it looks like a statue. It looks like a statue. That is absolutely just an amazing animal, an amazing find. And you can see some more here. Look like they, where it had broke apart, or they cut it apart. And some, I believe what happened. Some of it had actually it had gotten damaged during the transporting. I want to say maybe it had dropped. A portion of it had dropped, and it shattered portions of it. But they were able to get this animal out of that stone. And so they did a good job with it. It really looks nice, really amazing to look at. And you can see here, you can see some of those scale patterns there. You can see that going around some of those spikes. And that's looking down on it there. You got the tail kind of going off to the well, that is actually, that would be I believe that's the head area. That's not this will be the head. That's going to be the head part of it, because it pretty much towards the left-hand side of it, it didn't. That's about all that they were able to get there. You're just looking on top of it, so the head is going off to the right, because in one of the articles that I read, it said that the neck was curving to the left, so that would be right there. Looks really neat. Looks really nice. You can see the scales there, those little patterns. Chemical tests of the dinosaur skin have hinted at the presence of a reddish pigment, contrasting with the horns' markedly light coloration. So they believe that this animal had some reddish pigments inside of that of the skin there. So it probably was a beautiful animal to behold. In the Nodosaur's time, the area resembled today's South Florida, with warm, humid breezes wafting through conifer forest and fern-filled meadows. Now that's what they said, not that's what I said. That's what they said. It's even possible that the Nodosaur gazed out on an ocean. Now, if you look right there, that's where it was found. Now I'm going to tell you right now, that was a long ways away from the ocean, and that's where it was found at. Evidently, what they're saying is that the ocean was much closer to it than what you're seeing now. But I'm going to tell you right now, that animal, a flood killed that animal. And it's very possible that animal, it may not have died right at that part. It could have been in a different area, and then the sediments, the flood and the sediments just drug it there. It very well could be that the animal was just there, and a huge tidal wave and mudslides just buried that animal right away, and where it stood, where it was eaten at, that's where it died. And so to me, the flood makes a whole lot more sense than does that thing drifting away, getting washed away, because that's one thing we can't agree on, is that water did play a part in this animal. There's no doubt about it. Water did do that. But this also shows that fossilization can occur in a much shorter time than what the evolutionists say. And that's what they're scratching their heads on, is that how rare it is for this animal to be whole. For the most part, this animal was whole. And they have found other dinosaurs that were like that, just like the hadrosaur. They found the hadrosaur it was a whole animal. So that shows that animal fossilized way much quicker than what they their theories are. And so but again, it's not near the water. It's nowhere near the water. But with an entire planet being flooded, that can easily be seen. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to stop right there. We're going to come back with some more things. But I hope that these videos are definitely being a good insight. And hopefully answering some questions. And so there is a ton of more stuff to come. This is still just a scratch off the top of what I have, and things are. And as I'm showing these videos, I'm actually have articles that I'm actually going through and adding into this. I'm always trying to keep up with new things that are out here, and a lot of what you've seen on this video came from secular sources. I did not get these from Christian sources, except for the ones from Vance Nelson in his book. I just showed you just a couple pictures there. But the fossils of the Nodosaur and the Hadrosaur, those came from evolutionary, like Nova and National Geographic is where I got that stuff from. So there's a lot of stuff that's there. You guys that are Christians, don't kick these people off to the side just because they may have a different belief there. There's a lot of good scientists that are smart. They know their stuff. They're just confused. They just have a different theory on what happened to them and where they came from. And so, but they have a lot of good research, and a lot of research, if put into the biblical time frame, really makes better sense. And there's not much confusion on what happened. And so, again, I hope you guys enjoy this. I hope the Lord blesses you real good and you have a good day. Take care. Bye-bye.